All right, everybody. Welcome to Module 8, our final module in our Fiddleheads mini workshop. So in this module, I'm going to move away from talking about ferns themselves to talk about some of the resources that we have available to better understand and appreciate fern diversity. And this is an entirely, not random, but an entirely limited sample of all the resources that are available. And I'm going to focus on digital resources. The first one, of course, that I've been relying on quite heavily in doing this workshop is the Jepson eFlora. There's a huge realm, a huge diversity of resources available via the eFlora. You can, for example, use a key where it's filtered by your particular geographic region. So if you are in a particular area and you find a fern, you can filter it so that the key only includes the species from that area. So super, super helpful. It's a big series of videos. You guys have already looked at the Polisticum video, but there's a whole diversity of videos, as well as a whole bunch of other resources, including in our databases, the ability to search for all sorts of specimens that are housed in the herbarium. So if you search for Pentagramma pallida, for example, you can find all our specimens that we have. You can see an image of them. You can see all the collection data, a huge wealth of information that's available. This is a link to the video series that I just mentioned. So lots of videos about California's amazing native plants. And a huge wealth of resources, aside from the keys, which we've been using already in these modules. I've also been taking some of the images from another site called Ferns of the World. This is sort of I would describe this as a more curated collection. So it has really high quality photos for a relatively limited number of plants, still an awful lot. And each of them is associated with a single herbarium specimen. So if we look through this site, for example, we could search for this particular species and find the observations, and you see really quite good photos, lots of them showing different morphologies, information of where it was collected, taxonomic information, collection information, really good source for high quality information on ferns. And then, of course, I've been showing a lot of iNaturalist. So iNaturalist is a community driven project where basically it's a collection of observations made by amateur naturalists or made by anybody. And if you were to query California for ferns, back when I did this anyway, there were 66,000 observations that have been made in California, covering 128 species. And so again, a huge wealth of information about not only what species are here, but where they're found. And I want to mention another major resource, which I haven't been hitting on as directly, but it's called the Trudel Collections Consortium, and it's a project that I'm involved with, and that is led by UC Berkeley. So it's I think a super exciting homegrown project. And the aim of the Trudel Collections Consortium is to digitize almost 2 million specimens that are in Herbaria. And it's a big consortium with lots of collaborators across the United States. And so we have three main goals. We want to establish this consortium, and it actually includes not only living ferns, but also fossil ferns, so paleontological information. And then we're going to digitize all of these specimens and make them available via a digital portal. So we have this portal where you can access all of this information, and that's called the Trudel Portal. If you go to trudelportal.org, you can access all of this data. You can do all kinds of cool stuff with it. So for example, if you go to the search function, you can search by collections, and you can make a polygon somewhere on the globe, wherever that happens to be, and ask for all the fern records that are present in that polygon. So in this case, there happened to be, 387 records that were captured. You can see information about each one of them. If you press on one, say this one here, you can pull up all of the information, including an image of that specimen. So again, a huge realm, a huge wealth of information available. Aside from doing maps and searching for records, you can make checklists. And this is something that we haven't done very much, but anyone that's interested could certainly do this, where you can query the data to find out how many species have been reported. And you can make your own checklist where you link all of the taxa in your checklist to an actual specimen. So unlike some checklists where it can be challenging to document whether or not a species really occurs in an area, here you can make a checklist that is directly linked to the documenting specimens of each of your taxa. So a very convenient way to make a very robust and reliable checklist for a particular region. And so here's what I did with California, for example. I asked it to tell me, what species are there records of that aren't yet in my checklist? Oops, sorry. And so I can go now and check through each of these and see whether or not I believe that record or whether there's some error, and I can include those species in my checklist automatically. And finally, and sort of a bit of a plug, all of these functions, of course, are based upon the fact that we have this wealth of digitized data. And somebody needs to do those digitizations. There's lots of people basically around the world who are working on this, and you could be one of them. So this is one of those cases where individuals in their spare time can make a really impactful contribution to resources for ferns. And you can, for example, join us in our crowdsourcing tool, where you can pull up a record, see a photo, and then you can say, okay, I see that the collector is this person, this is their number. And then you can ask the system if they found any other duplicates of that elsewhere in the system, in which case you can fill in the data automatically. And if not, you can manually enter it in and mark that record as completed, and it will join the rest of the database. So a way to make a concrete contribution. And this shot is highly out of date, but it just shows that we have a few volunteers who are doing an extreme amount, making really major contributions to the available data. And this is not available just to them, of course. This is available to the whole scientific community as well as to the entire general public. So this is a multi-purpose resource. And I highly encourage people to get involved if you have any interest in that sort of thing. I should mention briefly that underlying the Trudel Portal is a taxonomy, a taxonomic thesaurus that has all of the species organized according to their taxonomy. And this can also be a very useful tool, not only for using the resource. So like Stacy was saying, in terms of the eFlora, you can search for taxa using synonyms, not just the currently accepted name, but also for understanding fern taxonomy. And you can browse through the taxonomy and see how things are organized. So here, for example, I shouldn't have done this one. This is Mirati alias, which we haven't talked about at all, but you can see all the recognized species, all of their synonyms, how they are, what families, or what genera are grouped together into which families, etc. So if you have any questions about the PCC, you can email us. That will actually go to Amy, who's here on the call, or you can email me directly. And you can follow us in a variety of means. But I really encourage people to check out the Trudel Portal if you have any interest in that sort of thing. And that's it for our module. So thank you everyone for your participation. I do have one more activity and we have one more discussion. So I'm not saying goodbye, but thank you again for your attention during these modules. I hope everybody found it useful. I want to close with one image of a beautiful desert fern. So we talked a bit about xeric ferns. This is in the genus Notholena. This is Notholena californica, growing perhaps in the Mojave. So again, our Mojave audience member should go and try to find some beautiful Notholena californica.